Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the Boston chapter meeting for the month of December. We do have a great speaker coming up talking about a certain Red Sox game. I know that I've had a few conversations with a few people around the area and everything talking about, so you're going to talk, John, about game 5. Well, everybody talks about game 4. I hate to say that I was at game 3, but we won't talk about that, So we're sort of intrigued to find out, what about game 5? I'm sure that you're going to explain that. So that's good. So that's this month. But next month, we do have another speaker coming up. We have Bill Rysick from around the Connecticut area. I also will encourage all of you to look at the events calendar on SABR to see not only our meetings coming up, but everybody else's too. There's a huge number of meetings out there. If you just want to take a little trip, say to the West Coast, well, go to a meeting out in Seattle. It can be done. So it's a great way to see what other people are doing and also to get involved in that way. But we're going to hopefully have a chapter meeting, a Zoom one, since this is how we're doing it, over the next 6 months or so, that we do have it kind of mapped out. A few months, we're still looking to confirm and everything. We tried to talk a few other people into it, but we found out that couple of people are shy out there, but I really do think that you will enjoy the wide range, the eclectic group of speakers that we have lined up over the next 6 months. So stay tuned. So, all right, Bill, anything else to add on that?
Not to the schedule, no, but yes, do check the events calendar. I check it every few days, and I'll find something happen on a Thursday at 9 o'clock or something like that, and maybe tune in.
Yeah.
I have been known to watch 1 or 2 of them after the fact. We do tape them, and they're available, as
yes.
noted. So this is the book, The Forgotten Game. John Vampatella will be on with us in just a moment, and he can introduce himself really, and then hopefully tell us about the book and how it got going. Some people, when I saw the book's title and I realized what it was about, I thought, I'll never forget that game. I was there. So was Saul. So were some of you. And in fact, I've written elsewhere that the 1-2 punch of game 4 and 5 were the greatest games in Red Sox history. I mean, it had been 86 years, and it set up a winning streak that just never stopped from that point on. So, just never forget it and so forth. And the fact that they both ended on the same calendar day, I always thought was pretty cool. They did a few more games to win, but they won every one of them and exorcised the curse. Can you believe it? As someone once said. I don't know, for the next week or so after it was over, I couldn't believe it when they'd won the World Series. There were actually literally 3 or 4 times that, just to be funny, I pinched myself to see if it was really true. But there were a couple of times I woke up in the morning and I thought to myself, did that really? Yes, of course it happened. But anyhow, let's let the author, John, explain why you gave it that title. It does get your attention. And I'll say, this is really a terrific book. I mean, I was there, I've written about it, I've watched it again. I just really, really enjoyed reading the book. So John.
Well, thanks guys. I really appreciate it. It is really a privilege for me to be here. I love talking baseball. I love talking baseball with knowledgeable baseball fans. And this certainly is a group of knowledgeable baseball fans. So I really appreciate the opportunity. I love Game 5. Let me take you back a little bit to the origin of the book and why I did it. I've been a baseball fan for a long time. Well, not as long as some of you, longer than some of you. I just turned 52. My family moved from Long Island to Maine when I was 40 years old. My dad was still is a big Yankee fan. And he was an airline pilot, and we moved to Maine. And being 40 years old, I didn't have any baseball knowledge. And so people ask me sometimes, how did you become a Red Sox fan if your dad was a big Yankee fan? Well, I'll give my dad credit. He let me grow up into whatever fan I would become, right? He didn't push Yankee fandom on me, for which I'm eternally grateful. So when I was young and growing up in Maine, of course, that's Red Sox country, and I'm old enough such that we didn't really have ESPN. We didn't have really too many ways of watching any other team or following any other team. So every night during the summer, I would fall asleep with my clock radio playing Red Sox games, and I would probably fall asleep in like the 5th inning. And then I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do is go to the newspaper, grab it from the street, and take out the sports section and look for the Red Sox game story and box score. And of course, the Portland Press Herald. So if some of you are familiar with Maine, the Portland Press Herald is a paper that we had every morning. And so everything was a big Red Sox article, and then everything else was in the, additional Major League Baseball category. So it was just easy for me to follow the Red Sox because that was the local team. All my friends were Red Sox fans. And so it created quite an interesting dynamic between my dad and myself. You can imagine, right? He was rooting for the Yankees. I was rooting for the Red Sox. And it's just been that way really all the way to the present. And my first ever baseball in-game experience was in 1977, I believe it was. My parents took our family and a neighboring family down to Boston for a few days. We did the Museum of Science, the aquarium, and we did a game at Fenway. The Seattle Mariners, the expansion Seattle Mariners were in town, and the Red Sox beat them 10-5. George Scott hit a grand slam. We were sitting right by the Green Monster, and of course there were no monster seats then, and the ball went right past us. That's where I learned a harsh lesson about sports gambling, because the next time he came up, I bet my buddy Matt 10 cents that they would walk him intentionally, and of course they didn't, so I owed him 10 cents, which I didn't have. And so I asked my dad to cover me the 10 cents, and he said, I'll do it this time, but never bet unless you have the money to pay. So I've since stopped betting on sports. That was the only time I've ever done it. But very easy to become a Red Sox fan. And all of you can remember probably your very first time to a major league ballpark, especially Fenway. You know what it's like. You for the first time you're a kid, and you come out of the tunnel and you see the crisp white lines, the green grass, the dirt, the Green Monster, and you just instantly fall in love with the place and with baseball and with that team. And I had no idea the heartache that this team would put me through for the next several decades, which you all know what that's like. 2000s, fast forward to 2003. We'll skip all the ugliness of 86 and 78 and all that. So let's get right to 2003. It's game 7, and Pedro is pitching, and he's doing great through 7 innings. You all remember this story. My dad calls me up in the bottom of the 8th inning. Red Sox are up 5-2. He calls me up in the bottom of the 8th, and he says, congratulations. I said, congratulations for what? He said, well, it looks like the Red Sox finally did it. I'm like, what are you talking about? We still have 2 innings to go. He's like, nah, they've got this. I'm like, Dad, you need to not have this phone conversation with me, because this could go south real quick. And he's like, no, Pedro's pitching too well. Well, we know what happened in the bottom of the 8th. And when Posada hit the game tying double, I literally just hung up on my dad. I'm like, I can't even talk to you right now. Click, we're done. And he still laughs about that. Of course, the Yankees go on to win that game, the series, and you think it's never going to happen, right? It's just never going to happen. Then 2004 comes, and I'm sorry for those of you who went to game 3, because that was ugly, right, Joanne? That was a 19-8 wipeout, really, by the Yankees, and they looked dead in the water, right? They looked totally useless. Somehow they came back to win game 4, and everyone remembers that because of the Dave Roberts steal. Let's skip game 5 because everyone remembers game 6 because that was Schilling with the bloody sock. And then everyone remembers game 7 because they finally vanquished the Yankees, completed the comeback. But game 5 is just of the 4 games that the Red Sox won in that series. It's the one that most people kind of glaze over a little bit. Obviously, it's different if you've been there or if you're a Red Sox historian, but the average baseball fan, certainly even the average Red Sox fan, doesn't really remember a ton about game 5. So I got the idea. I wanted to write a book. This is last year during COVID, well, I guess we're still in COVID, and I really wanted to dive into this game, and I couldn't find any book that really focused specifically on that game. And I thought, what would it be like to write a book that walks you through that game? So I ended up rewatching the game about a dozen times and saw both MLB's and Fox's broadcast. And then I listened to the radio broadcast as well. And I just compiled thoughts from the game and just played it inning by inning. I just take you inning by inning. But throughout the book, I take you on little tangents to have little baseball conversations about a variety of things. So when Wakefield came in the game, at that point in the book, I take you on a little excursion about the knuckleball and how challenging that is to throw, to hit, and to catch. I talk about the Alex Rodriguez trade that nearly happened to the Red Sox, right? You all remember that? That didn't end up going through, and then he ended up with the Yankees. I've told that story, and a lot of Red Sox fans even are like, geez, I don't remember that. But that almost happened. I talk about, and this is where this group would really, really appreciate it. I talk about the value of bunting and the run expectancy of bunting, because in the 8th inning, the Yankees had an opportunity to get a runner to third with one out if they bunted, and they did, and it turned out to backfire on them. But we get into a little baseball strategy. So the book has a lot of neat little side conversations. And the reason I did that is because I think it follows the flow of a baseball game. You know what it's like. Baseball is a slow sport, which leaves lots of time for these kinds of conversations. Just recently, I went to my first ever Red Sox playoff game in person. It was game 4 of the ALDS against Tampa. And that was the day of the Boston Marathon this year, being rescheduled due to COVID. And I remember we were talking in our whole section about how long they were going to keep Eduardo Rodriguez in the game, right? Each inning, it was like, are they going to pull him now? It's like, I don't know. He's doing pretty well. I know, but Cora likes to pull somebody out, before they get to the 3rd time through the order. And you know how baseball games go. You have these kinds of side conversations all the time. One of my favorite little tangents I take in the book is I get into a little discussion on who I think is the greatest pitcher of all time. And it would probably please this group to know who I concluded at his peak was the greatest ever. And so I think go ahead.
No, I was just kidding.
What were we saying?
I said Andy Pettit.
Andy Pettit. No, not even Yankee fans, I would hope, wouldn't say him. But those kind of side conversations are part of baseball. They're part of what happens in the stands. And so I think it helps the flow of the book. So as you go inning by inning, you're treated to some of these conversations about the players, about baseball strategy, about baseball history, that I think just add to the telling of the story. So it was a blast to write. I was very fortunate to have the book published. Anyone who's an author or who has tried to be an author knows it's not easy to get a book published. So I was very grateful that it actually made it to market. So that was pretty cool. And it's just afforded me a lot of opportunities to have conversations like this, where I get to talk about baseball. My wife, when they won the World Series, I'd woken up my oldest son to see the 9th inning in game 4 of the World Series. And when, Folk stabbed the ball, tossed to first, and everyone's going crazy, my son, he was like 7 at the time. He was all happy. But then my wife looks at me, because she knows she's not a big baseball person, but she knows how long and how much this means. And she said, so was it everything you thought it would be? And I looked at her and I said, yep, it really is. It is awesome. And so it really was. And then, of course, they followed up with 07 and 13 and 18. And it's just been a great ride since then. But that 04 team, obviously very special to Red Sox fans. And I wanted to tell a little more of the story that really hadn't been told in depth. And I think the end result's a pretty fun read. So that's kind of my story as to how I wrote it and why I wrote it, and what I was trying to do with it. It's really just for baseball fans to enjoy one of the greatest games of baseball by one of the most memorable teams in baseball. And I think it accomplishes that. And I know some of you were at the game, and I assume most of us are old enough to remember that game pretty clearly. So I would love to hear, during the course of our time tonight, stories from you all as to what your experience of that game was, and even that team.
John, the thing that stuck out to me in reading the book, the one thing that really impressed me was that you devoted 9 pages to talking about Jason Varitek trying to catch Tim Wakefield's knuckleball in the top of the 13th inning. I mean, and it wasn't boring. That was fun reading that. 9 pages. I used to tell people, people complain about word count, writing a game story, I said I could write 1,500 words on one at bat. Well, you did kind of, and it was really. Just tell us about that one thing of Veritek trying to handle Wakefield instead of Mirabelli getting in there and all. But
Right. So you remember earlier in that year, Mirabelli hadn't been on the Red Sox, but they realized at some point in the season they needed to have him back. So they made that trade. And if you recall, he arrived right before a game, and the Boston or the Massachusetts, state police gave him an escort from Logan to Fenway, and he arrives at Fenway and immediately jumps in the game, to serve as Wakefield's personal catcher, because Veritek, as good of a player as he was, and he was a really good player, just really struggled to handle the knuckleball. And on this particular night, Wakefield's knuckleball was going crazy, and it was really difficult to hit. He was throwing it beautifully, but it was moving all over the place. And the question really comes up as to why in the world at that point, why Terry Francona didn't go to Mirabelli. And I think the answer is that he wanted Veritek's bat in the game, and he was willing to take a chance on the fielding part of it. But boy, the 13th inning, if you recall, was a wild adventure. And I think that inning was the biggest white knuckle, like roller coaster ride I've ever been on as a fan. I just thought at any moment they're going to lose the game in the dumbest way possible, right? A stupid wild pitch is going to get him. And so Veritek had three, either, I forget if they were pass balls or wild pitches. I forget how they scored them, but he had several others get by him, just not quite far enough to advance runners. And so it was, you just couldn't believe what you were watching. And so I thought it was worth diving into that a little bit, because I thought that was a fascinating piece of the game. And especially given that Wakefield gave up the homer to lose the 2003 series, it was really neat for him to be in that game and come out the winner. But I think most of you can recall that crazy ride in the 13th inning. The nice thing was that the last pitch of that inning, Wakefield threw a beautiful knuckler, and Veritek handled it no problem. Like, boom, catch, end of the inning, and the Red Sox lived to see another day. But that was a super tense. And the crazy thing is, watching that game about a dozen times, it still made me nervous. Even though I knew what was going to happen, I was still nervous watching it, because it was so tense watching Wakefield throw and Veritek try to catch. He made the point that it was like trying to catch, I forget the quote, like catch a fly with chopsticks or something like that. And really challenging for Veritek, but they got through it, which was great.
Well, anybody that was a Red Sox fan knew the Red Sox were going to lose, and yet they just didn't.
Yep. I think the moment where I thought this game was possible for them to win was in the 9th inning. Ruben Sierra was at first base, and Tony Clark, if you remember when he played for the Red Sox, he was, I don't want to speak ill of any major league player, because any major league player is a great baseball player by definition. But for that level, Tony Clark played terribly for the Red Sox in that one year he was on the team. But he goes to the Yankees, and as happens with so many guys that they pick up, he actually played really well for them. And he was up in a big spot, and he hits a rope down the right field line, right by the pesky pole. And at Fenway, that fence is only about 3 feet high there. The ball hits the top of the fence and kicks over. Ground rule double. And that means Sierra had to hold at third. And obviously this year, Renfroe had that ball ricochet off him and go into the bullpen that had the same deal. And so that brought back memories of 2004. And so Sierra had to hold at third. Red Sox get out of the inning. And I thought, wow, that's the first time I can recall the Red Sox actually getting a break against the Yankees. Maybe they got a chance here. And that turned out to be one of the biggest at-bats of the game.
Can I say something, John? I thought that it was, going back to Wakefield, I think it meant so much to a lot of people, and you're right. I mean, I can't wait to read your account. It really was white knuckle, no pun intended, that 13th. But the fact that it was Wakefield, the guy who had kind of given up his start the night before in game 3,
yep,
to pitch 3 innings when the game was out of hand. And I was at that one too. I wasn't at 4, but going to 3 and then 5, I think was perfect, because it was like the low and the high of being a Red Sox fan in like 2 days. And everyone was cheering for Wakefield in game 3. It was like the only thing we had to cheer for. And then game 5, it was just so wonderful to see. And of course, after 03 too, he let up the home run, to Boone. Then to see him be at the center of everything in 04, to me at least, made it extra special.
I agree. Wakefield's always been a fan favorite, right, for Red Sox fans. And so I think everybody, of course, everyone was disappointed in 2003 to lose to the Yankees, but I think everyone felt bad for Wakefield because he pitched very well in that series. And in that game, he just gave up the one pitch, right? And so I think everyone felt, of all the guys to give it up, it shouldn't have been him because he was a really good soldier for that team. And so it was extra, you're right, it was extra special to see him perform so well in a big spot in game 5. That was pretty awesome. So
You
I would
ever,
love
heard you ever heard what Bob Uecker says about how to catch a knuckleball?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in the book where he says basically just let it roll to the backstop and go pick it up.
Yeah, right. Wait till it stops rolling.
Yep.
Best way to catch it. Yeah.
Yep. I would not want to try to catch it. It doesn't seem so bad, maybe even on TV, but if anyone here has any experience actually catching a knuckleball that's moving like that, it's really, really hard. And so even for the best players in the world, it's a challenge. So extra hard to hit too. So that's why you throw it, I suppose. So I'm open to any questions that people have or any comments or again, stories that you might have from your experience either at the ballpark that day or watching it on TV.
Most people are muted here. We've got more than 40 people. Just unmute yourself and speak up and then come back on again, maybe.
And also raise your hand, in the reaction thing, raise your hand.
All right, I'll go first since nobody else wants to talk. As Bill Nowlin knows, I had season tickets at that time for 30 years. I was at game 3, 4, and 5. And the two things I remember is that I would go to a game on one day and get home on the next day. And my house is only a 20-minute walk from Fenway. The other thing is that after game 3, I could not find any of the Fenway faithful who wanted to go to game 4 or 5 because they were all afraid that they were going to have to watch the Yankees dance on Fenway Park turf as winners. So I had great tickets, I had great seats, and I couldn't find anyone who wanted to go.
Dixie, I sold my tickets to game 4 for face value outside. I was going with my son. He's 13 years old, and I didn't want to expose him to the Red Sox getting crushed. I left when it was 17-6 in game 3 because he was home with a 13-year-old friend of his, and the two dads thought, hey, we ought to go home. And it worked out pretty well. Saul and I went to game 5 together, actually, and then watched the rest on TV.
Well, they missed out on something pretty awesome because game 4 and 5, I think game 6 was amazing too, right? That was a great game. Game 7 was great only insofar as the Red Sox won, but as far as like a classic baseball game, it wasn't nearly at the same level, but it was great. I'm so glad they won in a blowout in game 7 because I don't think my heart was ready for another. And actually when Pedro came in the 8th inning of that game, I think we all probably got nervous, right? And the Yankees scored a couple of runs and we're like, oh no. And then I think maybe 7th inning, then Bellhorn hit the homer off the foul pole that gave everybody in Red Sox Nation a little sigh of relief. But yeah, that team was amazing. Remember Kevin Millar rather said, don't let us win tonight before game 4. And that might have just been bravado. It might have just been him talking nonsense like he kind of tended to do, but he was right. And they came back and won. And it was the most remarkable thing. And one of the things I love about the Red Sox coming back that year, aside from the fact that they ended up winning the World Series, they vanquished the Yankee Dragon, but is that every time from now on in any major sport where a team is down 3-0, this team will get mentioned. I love that. I love that it's etched in history forever, and it will always be part of baseball and sports lore. So, every time it gets mentioned, we get to celebrate a little. Yankee fans have to eat it a little bit. That's extra special. Yep. Mark Wise, the gift that keeps on giving. It really is true. Really is true.
It had been 25 times that there'd been a 7-game series and a team was down 0-3. In 20 of those 25 games, the sweep happened. None of the games, other series ever got even to game 7. They were all resolved in either 4, 5, or 6. So this is the first time it forced a game 7, and then with Damon's grand slam kicking things off in the 7th game, it was as you said, John, a fairly easy ride.
It's never easy, right? I
Yeah.
didn't relax until the final out, but I relaxed a little more when Bellhorn hit the homer. But I just kept waiting for the inevitable Yankee comeback to happen. But every time they showed the Yankees in the dugout with their forlorn faces, it was great. I'm such a bitter anti-Yankee person. It's great. So revisiting this team and this game was just a blast from a baseball perspective, as a writer, but really as a Red Sox fan. I don't think I would have written about, a terrible Red Sox loss. That would have been no fun for me. So to write about this was really special for a lot of reasons. And my dad did not call me during this series. I kind of wish he had, but he didn't. So we have good conversation about it since then. But I hope that the book at least gives you the spirit of the game. It gives you a sense of how the game went, and is a fun enough read. It should read like you're going through the game, like you're watching the game. My dad did read it, and he said it was like I was watching the game for the first time, because I think he had blocked this game out of his memory. So even he kind of enjoyed the book despite the outcome. Andy,
John,
you have
one thing I
I-
thought was really special was when the fact that the game started at 5 o'clock, which is a very odd starting time still, but the fact that it was like, night was falling and it was kind of dusk. And I think Bill and I must have already been in our seats, or maybe we're walking in. And when Pedro came in from the bullpen, I think I wrote about this in my book about 04. It was like the clapping was almost like you would hear for a conductor going up to lead a symphony. It was very like almost polite applause. I don't know if other people were thinking about the fact that it might be his last game for the Red Sox. I know I was. It was the last game he ever pitched at Fenway Park for the Red Sox. And maybe ever. I don't know if he pitched ever for somebody else at Fenway, probably not. Just him coming out and that reverential applause, I'll never forget that. But I was curious whether what one story or one thing you came across, maybe on the 8th or 9th or 10th viewing, surprised you the most, or ended up being the kind of coolest factoid besides the knuckleball catching.
Well, I think for me, telling the story of Alex Rodriguez getting traded and then getting untraded, basically, it was a really, really interesting story. I had the opportunity, I would say I met Alex Rodriguez. That's overblowing it. I didn't really meet him. I was at Fenway in 06. If you remember the series, the Yankees came and beat the Red Sox like a drum for like 5 straight days at Fenway at the end of the 06 season. I had my oldest son with me. And we were at the Sunday night game that had a big long rain delay, and the Red Sox lost in extra innings. I think Schilling against Mussina was the pitching matchup for that game. But before the game, we were sitting down the third base line, and out the Yankees were just doing warm-ups out there, and I got to interact with 4 Yankees at the time. It was Randy Johnson, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, and Alex Rodriguez. And of the 4, so here's a quiz. I'll ask you guys this question. Which of the 4 players that I mentioned, rank them in order in terms of nicest, Mr. Congeniality down to the biggest jerk to the fans? How would you expect that to go?
Mariano's got to be 1 for friendliest.
Okay.
But this might be a trick question. You might end up telling us that A-Rod was the nicest, but.
Okay, so you say Mariano first. Who else?
Well, and then Jeter. Maybe who is the other one besides A-Rod, Jeter, and
Mariano, A-Rod, Jeter, and Randy Johnson.
Oh, maybe Randy's the worst. I hear he's kind of a jerk. So maybe Jeter second. I'll put Randy third and A-Rod fourth.
Okay. The actual order was, I'll go reverse order. Randy Johnson, boy, he was unpleasant. Had no time for the fans, just snarky, just mean, you know what I mean? Just not, now I don't know if that's the way he is in real life or if that's his baseball persona, but he was not pleasant. Third was Jeter. He was very indifferent to the fans. He just kind of just blew us off. Wasn't mean, but he just wasn't really friendly. Mariano was second. I got his autograph. He was very pleasant, but A-Rod he just leaned over the fence. And this is before they had, the screens and everything. And he just was chatty, nice, friendly. He joked around with the fans, and that blew my categories. That was not what I expected out of A-Rod. So anyway, that was 06. But in 04, the trade that almost happened, the Red Sox made a deal that was a blockbuster, right? They were going to trade Garcia Parra and Ramirez, and they were going to get back A-Rod and Maglia Ordonez from the White Sox. And I think John Lester was going to be involved in that trade too. And so It was going to be just a mammoth deal. But A-Rod agreed to it, but the deal was that the Red Sox couldn't take on all his salary. So they had agreed to cut down on A-Rod's salary. It wasn't that the Rangers were going to, the Rangers were going to eat some money. It was that A-Rod was personally going to take a pay cut, but the players union rejected it. So the trade never went through. And then Aaron Boone got hurt playing pickup basketball. Yankees suddenly needed a third baseman. They make a trade for A-Rod, and the rest is history. Right? So even this year's playoffs, when they had the Fox studios outside of Fenway, and if you saw those games when the Red Sox fans were just giving it to A-Rod, I thought to myself, he's not, forget the steroid stuff. From a Red Sox fan perspective, he's not as villainous as you would think he was. He was willing to take a pay cut. I mean, he was still going to be a fabulously wealthy individual, but he was willing to take a pay cut to come to Boston. And most Red Sox fans don't either know that or don't remember that. And I thought that was a fascinating story to tell. It just gives you a different perspective on Rodriguez.
He was married at the time, and I think his wife was from Lowell, Massachusetts, as I recall. So he really did want to come here.
He did.
And it wasn't just a small pay cut. It was like $10 million or something.
Right.
Which maybe for him is chump change, but
which is why the union intervened, because they could not allow the precedent of a player agreeing to reduce a negotiated contract to facilitate a trade.
Yep. So naturally, the Yankees, with their deeper pockets, were able to take him on, no problem, and the rest is history, right? But I always thought, Red Sox fans give him a hard time. I'm not sure he deserves, except for the fact that he's now a Yankee, and of course, every Yankee should be given a hard time. But the venom that Red Sox fans have for A-Rod, it's like, geez, you don't remember that this guy wanted to be and was willing to take a pretty good sized pay cut to be a Red Sox, and the only reason he wasn't is because the players union intervened. Yeah.
What he wanted to be was an ex-Ranger.
Yeah, maybe, and he certainly didn't mind going to the Yankees. He was happy to be there.
Andy's got his hand up. We have to call on somebody who's being that courteous.
Well, I just wanted to this is a good conversation. That's why I didn't interrupt. I wanted to ask a different question though. So please, let's talk more A-Rod. I can wait, no problem.
I'm not going to moderate this. I'm game for anything, so it's fine with me.
Hop in, Andy.
Here's a segue on A-Rod. Probably one of the reasons he wanted to come to the Red Sox was visions he had at the time of actually setting the all-time home run record. Probably a motivation. And that's interesting, right? I mean, speculate, who knows how to play out his career. These things are kind of just, fun to do. But I suspect one of the calculations was, I like that monster and let's go. And I'll just crank up, 40 home runs a year for the next whatever years to get to 800, 900, 1,000. No, he can never do that. But especially just setting the record. I think in the back of his mind, that was one calculation Anyway,
Sure. I don't think it was that he was the biggest Red Sox fan in the world. I think he saw an opportunity. He saw a chance to be a bigger star in Boston than he ever was in Texas. He wanted to be part of the rivalry. They were coming off 2003 where it was Red Sox Yankees peak, rivalry type stuff. So he had a chance to, and at that point, the Yankees weren't even in the picture in terms of a possibility. It was only after Boone got hurt that the Yankees showed any interest like that. It occurred to them, oh, you know what, maybe we have a need here and an opportunity. So that worked out for them. But still, it would have been interesting to see how it would have changed things if A-Rod was a Red Sox shortstop for 12 years,
Right. Well, I had a different question about the game itself, and it has to do with the fact that you've seen the game many times. I remember seeing it. I have my own story of what happened. Interesting day that day with the game. But a lot of people have studied the game. Were there any close calls that were at all controversial? Where this is pre-replay, so maybe was there anything like that rose to the level of making your book or maybe potentially influencing this game? Because back then, you were stuck with an umpire call, except famously the A-Rod slap, where they actually changed something. But in general, that wasn't the case.
In game 6, there were 2 of them. There was the Bellhorn homer, right? That they were originally not going to rule a homer, but they got together and they got it right. So that's more signs that, maybe the Red Sox, maybe the fates are turning here for the Red Sox, right? Because they normally wouldn't get those calls. The one that I can recall in this game was David Ortiz stole second, and it was either a straight steal or a missed hit and run, and it looked like they threw him out by a mile. But actually, on replay, it actually looked like he kind of got around the tag and was safe, and that would have put him in scoring position. I think it was an extra innings, and so they didn't, obviously there was no replay, and it was Ortiz, so you would never think that he could possibly be safe, but he actually had a pretty nifty effort to get into second base that on replay probably would have called him safe.
It's a great trivia question. Which Red Sox was thrown out at second base on an attempted steal, whatever inning that was?
Yep. I think Mark has his hand up. Mark Wise. You're on mute, Mark. There you go.
Kristen has a good story in the chat. Maybe you want to tell us out live or not. But Mark, are you muted?
Yeah, Mark is muted.
I got it now. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure
Okay.
out. I had a question here. It's something that's not talked about too often, but it actually had a big impact on the series. I want to get your thoughts on it. Now, we all know Derek Lowe got bounced out of rotation for the postseason. He was pretty ticked about it. So he didn't start against the Angels. He was not scheduled to start game 4. It was supposed to be Wakefield, correct? But in game 3, the pounding's happening. You have a long man, Derek Lowe, that could eat up innings. Why didn't Terry Francona decide to go to Derek Lowe in relief early instead of having Tim Wakefield volunteer? I mean, it's great that it worked out the way it did, but why do you think that happened?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
I heard that Wakefield volunteered before you could even get to asking Lowe. That was what I was told when I talked to a few people about it, and that Lowe really wasn't interested. Now but of course that doesn't mean that Francona couldn't have told him to do it. But what a few different guys on the team told me was that Wakefield really just jumped at the opportunity like quickly, and that was just, and the fact that he was so used to filling that role where he could come in the middle of the game, whereas Lowe was more used to starting. I mean, it's a great question, but that was what I heard.
And Lowe was one of the unsung heroes of that postseason run. This is the other really good trivia question. Well, there's several. Another good trivia question. Derek Lowe won all 3 of the series clinching victories, right? Which was, and his game 7 performance was unbelievable, right? On 2 days rest, phenomenal performance. Red Sox, in order to pull off that comeback, they had to get some amazing performances from a lot of different people. And so it was a total team effort, and Lowe certainly pulled his weight and more.
Bob.
Yeah. Hi, John. I'm curious, Red Sox fans will always tell you the Fox broadcast is biased to the Yankees, and the Yankee fans would tell you just the opposite. And since you've analyzed the Fox broadcast and I guess the radio broadcast as well, I'm curious, what did you hear and how this story was told?
Well, my training is in sports broadcasting. I went to Syracuse University. I went to the Newhouse School of Public Communication. So my original plan in life, before I ended up going into sports ministry, was to be a sports broadcaster. So I've called a bunch of at least college level football, basketball games. And so I have a pretty decent sense of what a broadcaster is supposed to do and how they're supposed to handle their job. I didn't find anything bad about how they, I think every fan thinks the announcers hate their team and they're biased against their team. I didn't find anything against it. I thought there was some really good insight. This was Joe Buck before, I think Joe Buck, what's the phrase? Jump the shark. I don't know. Like I feel like he's definitely past his prime as a broadcaster. It doesn't mean he's bad. I just don't think he's as good as he used to be. And McCarver was really good in this series, I thought. I thought the MLB crew was good. Rick Sutcliffe, I never thought he was the color guy for the MLB broadcast. I had to give him a lot of credit because I quote him a lot in the book, and it's amazing how many times he either analyzed something really well or he kind of predicted what was about to happen. He said, "Here's where you got to go with the next pitch." Boom, and it was right on the money. And so I thought he was excellent. And Dave O'Brien did the play-by-play for MLB, and we are in Boston. We're very familiar with O'Brien's work. I think a lot of Red Sox fans are a little salty that he has Don Orsillo's place in the NESN broadcast, but I think O'Brien's a pretty good pro. And I thought both crews did a good job, but I think Sutcliffe was probably the best of the four main people doing their jobs that night. Obviously the EEI, the Red Sox radio broadcast is different because they're supposed to be homers, and they certainly were. So, hearing Castiglione call the game was pretty fun too. But I would say it was pretty neutral. I thought they both were pretty fair, did a good job.
Does anybody remember who threw out the first pitch? Like, was that the game with Louis threw it to Fisk? Or was that, I can't remember, but it'd be neat to know. And who sang the national anthem, stuff like that.
I don't remember that. I didn't get into
because that's never on the broadcast, if
Right,
they weren't
right.
there live. That's why I'm wondering if Dixie or Bill or anybody that was there remembers it.
Don't remember.
Well, I doubt Jim Rice did the national anthem, but maybe throughout the first pitch.
Oh, could have been Big Pappy's daughter who sang the national anthem too. She did a pretty good job in 2016 a couple times.
And that was a great coming out for Ortiz, right? 2003, 2004. He became David Ortiz, during those series. Bob Wood throughout the first pitch, huh?
Wow.
Okay. There you
Game
go.
4.
Game four. Okay.
Game 4.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. Well, the whole story about Ortiz coming to the Red Sox is pretty amazing. That the whole Pedro kind of putting in the word for him and all that. Begging them to take a chance on him. That was a neat story. So Pedro was great for yet another reason.
Yeah, Pedro is an all-timer, and that was David Arias, right? David
Right.
Arias / David Ortiz, and he was good with the Twins.
And Grady Little.
Yeah,
Grady Little wouldn't let him play until June.
right, because they had Jeremy Giambi, right? And you look back in retrospect, you're like, what in the world were they thinking?
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Better than his brother John, Jeremy Giambi. No, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that was one of those head scratchers that you look back and you go, man, how did that happen? But I'm glad they finally got it right.
And Shea Hillenbrand was there at the beginning of the year too, and I remain convinced to this day that Theo traded him to keep Grady from playing him because he was keeping Miller and Ortiz on the bench.
Andy had something to offer.
There's another great story of Ortiz's arrival that's described in the book Mind Game, which is about to 20-year-old book almost, but it's put done by Baseball Prospectus around various things around sabermetrics and stuff. But one of the stories they tell, and there's profanity in it, so I won't, I won't say it, but basically Ortiz first plate appearance in spring training. There it is. Who's got it? Walt's got it. Do you remember the story, Walt, from the book about Ortiz? Maybe you do. But Ortiz he does a sort of a level Riniac-ish, oppo, trying to go up the middle swing, and pops out to shortstop on his first plate appearance in spring training, walks back to the dugout. He's angry, and Little says to him, we at the Red Sox don't hit like blank. And Ortiz reacts and goes, oh my goodness. So this is his entree into like, yeah, let me just swing, cover the plate, swing it like I'd like to, as opposed to like the Twins hitting philosophy that he was doing. That's a good story, that Grady Little first plate appearance shakes him up and says, let's swing like you mean it. And anyway, not a well-known story really, that Grady Little said that to him.
So all is forgiven. Great.
Yeah, right. So Grady Little had a net positive effect, right? Is that what we're saying?
It is true though. I read several accounts about and heard several accounts about Ortiz being really frustrated on the Twins that he couldn't go for the fences. I think he had 20 home runs one year, but they wanted him to be a doubles guy, and he had like 35 doubles and about 400 at bats one year, but really wanted to, take his big cuts. And Tom
Kelly really didn't like him. I think it's that simple. He didn't like his glove. He didn't like his hitting style, and I really think held him back.
I do wonder what Ortiz would have been like had he been a full-time first baseman, because in the rare opportunities he had to play first, he was pretty good. Whether it be in the World Series or in NL Parks in interleague play, I always thought he handled himself pretty well there. And it never made sense to me why he wouldn't have gotten a better shot to play. Now he's a great DH, but I thought he would have been okay at first. So that was kind of a strange thing to me.
Cool little factoid from Adam about Ortiz beating I think it was A-Rod and Griffey in a home run derby in the minors. Wow. That's pretty impressive.
If you go to YouTube, you can see all of it. And all the news reporting of it, like a local news station reported this whole thing. And it's this wonderful reaction by A-Rod and Griffey. They're like, whoa, look at that guy. Because he's this very tall, thin, wild swinging, and they were all surprised by how well he hit the ball before he gets to the majors. And this is when he's like,
he was an A-ball, I believe, with the Mariners.
I think that's right. You should, but YouTube will find it for you. I'll do a little searching now to see if I can.
David Arias. Here's a good trivia question.
Yeah.
Name another guy who isn't really named what he's named in baseball, who is now in the Hall of Fame as of yesterday.
Now, I was going to say now as of
Yeah. Tony Oliva, really Pedro Oliva, took his brother's name.
He used his brother's name, yeah.
Yep, and his passport to get to the U.S.
And I don't think his brother appreciated. I think I read the story, or maybe when I was in Cuba. I don't think his brother appreciated that too much. I think it took a long time for them to make up. It's a true story.
Louis Tion told me that story, that you're right, that his brother was pissed off.
Yeah, they should have just cashed all the checks that were made out to him.
Yeah.
I was going to say Roberto Clemente.
So this is Appleton.
Oh, Bob Clemente. Yeah.
No, the fact that his name is Roberto Clemente Walker.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Is Walker his mother's name?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just a normal Latino
right.
name.
I was going to say that's common.
But
That's
the
it.
fact that he was named Bob on his baseball cards, I
Right.
know, I really pissed him off too.
So here's another
As it
trivia.
would anybody, right?
Yeah, I got another trivia that you guys in this group will answer no problem, but it stumps a lot of people. But the collective wisdom here, you'll get this no problem. In game 4, I'm sorry, game 5, the book that the game that I wrote about, there were 4 participants that are presently in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Who are they?
Or Rivera, of
Pedro.
course. Yeah. Did Rivera play in that game? Rivera,
Pedro,
Jeter.
Jeter, Rivera.
Who else on the Yankees? Anybody? Who else on the Red Sox? Oh, Pedro.
Yeah.
Pedro started the game. That's 3. In uniform, like, or they participate? I mean, okay, so the 4th is
Actually played.
Torrey.
Nope. No, I'm sorry. They played in the game. Not we're just
Okay,
a
well,
man.
Torrey makes 5.
Well, but he didn't play in the game.
Right,
so-
he didn't play in the game. Okay.
Right.
Who's the 4th one that played in the game? Oh,
Jeter.
wait. Oh,
Jeter.
no, we got Jeter. Wait, was oh, come on. Tim Raines, was he on that team?
Nope.
No.
Ooh,
Wow.
I'm-
Give us a
I'm-
clue.
I'm-
Give us a clue.
I'm partly happy that I'm stumping you. Yeah, Mark Hoyle got it.
Oh,
Messina.
Messina.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Messina.
Yeah, he's the one that everybody forgets, right? But you think about the star power of the guys in that game who aren't in the Hall of Fame. Ortiz, Manny, A-Rod, Sheffield. I mean, that's a lot of,
Yes, it's a lesson not to do roids.
yeah,
Of
I
course.
guess. Or we can still make a lot of
Ortiz,
money,
yeah.
don't it? But yeah,
Or-
yeah, I mean,
or don't
it's,
get caught.
yeah, right, exactly. But that game was just loaded with great players, you know? That's part of what made it special is I think 2003, 2004 was really peak Red Sox Yankees because they were playing for the highest stakes those two teams can possibly play for, right? Since they can't meet in the World Series, maybe someday those rules will change, but you know, to meet and both series went game 7, you know, it was just, I remember 78, but that was just to, you know, get to win the division, right? This was to go to the World Series, and it was 2 heavyweights slugging it out. Both teams were great teams, and so it makes sense that there are tons of stars on those teams.
I was there in 78, and it took me until just a couple months ago to finally get over that game when the Red Sox won the wild card game here
Oh yeah,
at Fenway Park this year.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, despite winning in 2004, it wasn't until this year's wild card game that I finally got over that one.
I gotta
You know,
remind
it's funny.
people that,
It's fu-
I gotta remind people
it's
that
funny, Bill. I've rewatched that game.
this is Ortiz's first year
I've never
coming up.
had a problem watching that game. It's 03 that I can't.
Hold on, Ryan, what were you saying?
This is Ortiz's first Hall of Fame year coming up. So to lump him in with the steroid allegations really isn't fair at this point
Oh,
because he hasn't been on the ballot yet.
No, and I actually, I mean, we can go down that road, but I actually was joking about Ortiz because I frankly think if he did it before it was officially illegal. It was not supposed to be released. And if you look at the trajectory of his career, he's so not a steroid guy. I mean, he had like his best years, one of his best years at the end. He wasn't hurt to that level. I just don't lump him in with those other guys.
Well, it'll be interesting to see when the ballot comes out to see where he is and if he does get in or how close he is if he does not get in. So
We can do a straw vote right now. Let's all raise your reaction hand if you think Ortiz is going to get in the Hall of Fame. Thumb up.
this year or
Yep,
ever?
this year.
Wait a minute. Now or ever?
No, this year. Will he get in first ballot? All right. Well, it looks like
No.
maybe half.
We're down to the last 5 minutes, by the way.
All right.
So is there anybody that has a question for John about, I have one question. Have you got another book in mind? But some other people may have some other questions too.
Mark, yeah, I'll just answer real quick that I have a million book ideas. The question is, what am I going to actually pursue next? That's the question. Go ahead, Mark.
I'd ask the question in the chat about why didn't the Yankees try to steal on him? Mark Y says because almost everybody was slow. When Veritek was catching, yet it would seem to me, even when you're slow and you have all those wild pitches and pass balls, I wonder, sometimes, I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes watching Joe Torre manage, seemed very risk averse to me. He always seemed that way as a manager, when he had the great Yankee teams and then he was managing the Dodgers against the Phillies. He was somehow always resigned that he always felt that, well, if something happens, something happens. I was just always amazed at that time, though, that they didn't try it. The Yankees had guys, whoever got on base. I don't remember all the at-bats and all that, but guys were on base all the time, right?
Would have put more pressure on Veritek.
Yeah,
would have he would have been even more stressed out.
I know, I don't know if Ruben Sierra was on base or people like Sheffield or whatever.
A-Rod wasn't slow. A-Rod was still pretty quick.
And I don't know. Again, I don't know the box. I don't have the box score in front of me, but I was always amazed that. I know it's going to sound crazy. Was it all? They would never. I never would think of it. Did they just shut down, or was there some sort of sportsmanship thing? I would never think of that. But did something happen when they just said they didn't take advantage? The Yankees just didn't do something that you would think that almost everybody would take advantage of. That's
well,
all.
to your point, Mark, think about game 6, right? You've got Schilling pitching on basically a busted ankle, right? He can barely, even watching him, you could see he could barely move. And not one time did they try a bunt that, to test his ankle. Not once.
That might have been sportsmanship.
Maybe.
Honestly,
maybe.
that,
Maybe,
but you're playing for the game like that, you think, why be
playing for the World Series? That's I just couldn't believe they didn't try it at least once.
But he did against Lowe in game 7, which is weird,
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder if by that point in his career, Joe Torre had some skins on the wall. I don't think he was doing his best managing in 2004.
Well,
he was a little complacent.
Well, I also know that in 2008, 2009 against the Phillies, he surely wasn't doing his best managing then either. So anyway, Bill has the book up.
Yeah, it's just, John, in our last 60 seconds or so here, why don't you answer the obvious question that someone asked me in the chat? Where can you get the book?
Well, you can pick it up on Amazon, kind of where you can buy anything under the sun. And if you would like, and this is new for me as a newer author, some people want a signed copy, which is cool, I suppose. I'm more than happy to do that. But if you want to do that, you have to go buy the book from my website, because they won't let you do that through Amazon. So johnvampatella.com, I just typed it in the chat. If you want to purchase it, with a signed copy, I'm happy to do that. If you have a note you want me to write, I can do that. It would be great if you were to pick it up. I think you'll find it an interesting, entertaining read. So Amazon, you can search for it on Amazon or johnvampatella.com. Either way is great.
And it is in the chat.
Last trivia question. John, that was great. Thank you. Trivia question. The last person drafted by the Montreal Expos, my son told me this last night. The last person drafted by the Montreal Expos still in pro sports today. All right, Walt. I knew Walt would get it. Jeez. He got it. Tom Brady. Drafted by the Expos as a catcher out of high school. Still in pro sports.
That's great.
Right. Good job, Walt.
Let me just say thanks to you all for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I could talk baseball like you all night, every day without a problem. So hopefully we get a chance to do this soon. That would be great.
You want to close us out, Joanne?
Yeah, we've got another, mention the next meeting coming up and, but you do need to unmute yourself.
Still
There we
muted.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Now I am. Yes, remind me of the date in January. Which day is it?
Is the first Monday, maybe?
First,
Or
yeah.
Monday? It's on the calendar.
No, anyway, but
January
the
6th.
important thing,
Okay.
okay, that's what it is. Anyway,
Oh, that's a terrible day.
oh no, not again.
Oh, no, come on. Len Levin, right?
No, it's not Len. He's too shy right now. We're still
Okay.
working on him.
All right.
It's going to be Bill Rysick, and for many of you that I noticed who were at the Rhode Island meeting a couple of weeks ago, that he had talked about Dr. Strangeglove, and it was an excellent presentation. I think everybody would like to hear it, and that's why we have decided to bring him on to this audience now. So put that on your calendar. It's not only a great baseball story, but it really does get into the psyche of a player. And so if you like that sort of a thing too, you're going to find it very intriguing to hear about Dick Stewart and just why he was strange.
Yeah, he gave a great presentation at the Rhode Island chapter,
Yeah.
Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's well worth repeating.
Johnny Pesky hated him, right? I mean, weren't the two of them like,
Well, you may find out just
yeah, I gotta
why.
read that. Yeah, I'm gonna find out. Yeah.
You might find out he was not too far off the mark. Excellent.
Well, Zoom let us run over. We didn't get cut off, which is polite of them. But
Yeah, let's go watch kickoff, right? Go Pats.
what could that be?
Oh, come on. Wasn't it great that we moved this back, John? Thank you. That was great to do that.
No,
Thanks.
perfect.
And it obviously didn't hurt attendance. Or it
Right.
did help
Yeah.
attendance. We had a great crowd. So
I
Still
didn't
got 40
think it
people
would.
on right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to hurt attendance. I really didn't.
well, when we moved it back, it didn't hurt attendance.
Well, yeah, that's right. But I still think we would have had a good stalwart crew. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well, thanks,
Oh, and by the
everybody.
way-
I'm going to turn off the recording part now.
John, we have to talk about Syracuse. I was their class of '89 Newhouse.